questions
Need a
for
motion,
staff?
probably. Oh, we get-
I got a question for staff. Go ahead. Tim Andrew.
Tim Andrew, Chief Legal Counsel. The legislation goes into effect after the first of the year and opens up parks to hunting across the board. So if the board fails to take any action at all on this implementation plan, then everything is open. There's no closed areas. There's none of the proposed closed areas or time restrictions that are in the implementation plan.
And all the work that the staff would have done, plus the changes that have been made relative to opening and closures at individual parks would have been lost.
Well, it could be lost for this meeting. At a future meeting, it could be utilized.
I heard one particular issue about Roche Cree State Park, and I just kind of looked at the map again about a strip of land on the east side of Highway 13. That might be one where we just simply sort of missed it on the map. The natural area that was talked about related to public hunting that's available immediately adjacent to that state park is actually to the north of that strip of land. All the other issues that I thought I heard here today related to sort of the amount of the designated use area closures and to expand that for some trail systems where we did not do that. And this really is the balance issue that the department has had to weigh, which is, and I think we mentioned that in all the listing sessions, if we used our department closure authority on literally every designated use trail and every designated use area, you would create a real patchwork of open and closed if the board didn't do anything more than that. And what we tried to do is, again, look at those most heavily used sites in a park and close that, and then recommend closure beyond that for the board to consider. It certainly is debatable and within your purview to go beyond what we have recommended related to additional closure as to what you've heard today. But that was the sort of the premise in which we, as recreation managers, developed our recommendation. We did not close every designated use area, and we tried to find that area of the park that's lesser used that would provide some ample opportunity. And the example at Governor Nelson is if we'd have provided a closure into that very north trail system, yes, it squeezes down the amount of available hunting quite a bit. Probably the hunting that's going to go on there would be waterfowl hunting along the shoreline of the creek. That's probably one of the few opportunities that exist there. Certainly within the purview of the board to because that trail is open in our recommendation, is to pursue closure in that area. But that was our premise, was to create some ample opportunity while providing for sort of the more heavily used parts of the park to be closed, either in a recommendation for your consideration or using our department authority for closure.
One more question for now. What's your signage plan?
Well, we will sign in a variety of ways. We're going to sign the trails. We're going to sign, this information will be available at our offices. We'll put it on our webpage. We will create basically maps after your decisions that we will put at trailheads and at our park offices related to those hunting seasons and those areas of the park that would be open. So we have to do a fairly extensive signage program on the property and a fairly extensive sort of update to our web pages and information brochures that we have related to these decisions. We also had some preliminary conversations with the Department of Tourism so that we get the information out about these decisions so that they can answer questions adequately as visitors call them.
So when you talk about signing the trails, are you talking about putting signs on the trails, or are you talking about putting signs on the perimeter?
We're going to put them at the trailheads, where people enter the trails, basically, where they access the trails.
So basically, we're going to let people know that there's hunting going on in here, but there's no marker to tell the hunter where 100 yards is.
Unless we have specific complaints about that, we don't see a vast undertaking of creating, every 200 feet, putting another signpost out. But if we have a particular issue at a particular designated use area, we will do that. But this issue exists all over the state, in other laws. The 100-yard prohibition related to discharge of firearm near a person's home. The state laws that require being off of a public roadway. Those issues are still there. We don't sign those either on public lands.
So the lady that I talked to that lives, borders on Wildcat Mountain State Park, last year during deer season said people lined up right on the park fence, right in her front yard, way less than 100 yards from her house. How did you deal with that?
Well, I actually haven't heard of that, Chairman, but if that particular case, that sounds something where, a unique case where we probably should sign. We have done a little bit of signage regarding that type of issue at a very, very limited number of sites, and Rib Mountain is one of those, where we did actually sign the park to identify that 100-yard buffer from private residences. We haven't done that, sort of universally, but we have responded to complaints as we became aware of them.
I have a couple questions, Dan. When I was going through this, on your trails, you talked about a lot of easements, and that this doesn't affect the easements. But is hunting allowed, on the outside of those easements currently on most of those trails? Because it's private land, isn't it?
That's correct, and we don't have a lot of easement ownership in the system. Where we've acquired easements is basically for the national scenic trails, and almost all of those national scenic trail easements are for hiking trail purposes only. And so the department, in working with that willing landowner to sell some rights for public use, only sold the rights to lay down a hiking trail. So we did not acquire the rights for hunting, public hunting.
Right, but I'm looking at it from the other perspective. So currently hunting goes on right now, right up to those trails.
It very well could.
Okay.
It might.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. And then I had another question. We kind of got bogged down in some numbers here on how many actual park users there are. And I think the graph that was presented in the green sheet might be a little deceptive because that's actually visits to the park. And can you actually, I did jot some numbers down because I asked you about this, but the number of park stickers that are actually sold?
Sure. I thought I might get asked questions about that. In 2012, we sold 230,879 annual admissions, 319,619 daily admissions, 85,208 trail passes, and other admissions, just a variety of sort of catch-all, about 25,000. Our total admissions to parks with all those categories is 660,724 admissions for a total revenue of $8.8 million.
Conservation agent licenses.
I think that it actually does, because that's the other admissions.
So does it, how do you keep track of walk-ins and hike and trail users that don't bypass?
You don't.
So there could be another 30 or 40 people that are using these trails and walking.
That's correct.
Oh, that's, case in point on that, Kaz, interestingly, the new path at Green Mountain is the parking area is an area owned by the town of Green Mountain. And so that's where all the cars park. So,
But the graph we were looking at shows visits. It's not really a body count because the same body could have been in and out a dozen times. And so I wanted to kind of put that into perspective based on the traffic that's the park usage during that proposed hunting plan.
But that's a standard park measurement across the country.
Right.
yes,
Right.
but that's a car park measurement. And if you have to count the walkers who come in that are not counted by a car. One car maybe brings in 20 car maybe back there for people, so you obviously have to count the walkers as well. And we have no way of doing that. We have plenty of these maps. There are parking lots that are not, people are parking their cars to do whatever they want to do, but they aren't going up to the PBS station and saying, I'm here counting. They're simply parking their car in that lot, and they have a car sticker on it. So the bell curve simply does not reflect the number of park users throughout the year. It reflects the number of people who go through Park PBS office.
Right, and I would agree with what Jane just said, because there are other places that people enter parks and they literally park outside the park and enter the park. We don't keep track of those numbers. You know, sometimes we work with the townships related to no parking signs and things like that to try to encourage people to come in and park in the park, and not create traffic issues for the local community. But that does happen, and it happens fairly often.
But the number is somewhere between the 15 million.
15 million is based on actual car traffic counter, and then we use basically a multiplier formula for, you know, people in the car, based on, it's usually like 2.8. But these are visits through the parks, so sometimes a car can come multiple times in for like camping a number of days, those kinds of things. So that's why we do not call it people, we call it visits.
So we're kind of dancing around here. Is there a motion of some kind?
You're right, Mr. Chairman, we are dancing. And it seems as though that's the appropriate thing to do at this time. But let me just start off by saying, I really think that our state parks are well managed and well run. However, I also think that the Sporting Heritage Bill Act, the spirit of it is absolutely tremendous. It kind of defines who we are as a state. We have a rich hunting heritage, but there is going to be a challenge to marry additional hunting and trapping opportunities to our existing state parks, given the wide diversity of use that we have there. My motion is that we leave the hunting opportunities and trapping opportunities the way they currently are, and that we, the DNR board, take Act 168 as a strong mandate to improve and expand hunting opportunities on our hundreds of thousands of acres that we already own and we need to improve.
So second that.
Tim Andrew.
As is, we want to leave it as is. As
Yeah,
it currently is.
So you don't want to take action on the department's implementation plan?
You know what, I feel bad because the department has worked their tail off to come up with a compromise statement.
If we leave it as it is, doesn't that, and I'm not in favor of further impacting our park users here. But if we leave it as it is, we don't have the ability to close, like if something, if the park on Castle Rock, Buckhorn, if that's open for archery now, if we leave it as it is, given the Act 168, as of the first of the year, that will automatically be open for everything.
That is correct.
That wasn't the intent of the motion. The motion was intended to leave the park management in terms of how it's currently managing hunting and trapping, the way it is, and that we incorporate an aggressive agenda to improve hunting and trapping opportunities on our considerable other acreage.
Well, my interpretation of what you just said, unless I'm wrong, is we're not taking action. The action we are taking is to leave hunting open in the parks where it is currently open and leave it closed where it is currently closed.
Okay.
But we can't, if we do that, and I don't think that's a bad idea, if we do that, we don't have the ability to regulate what species are being hunted or anything else. If we have parks that are currently open for archery,
As it is right now.
as it is, but the law doesn't, 168 does not give us that flexibility.
We're not sure of that.
Right, on January, can I clarify? On January 1st, what we had this year is gone. Parks are completely open to hunting trapping. And then the board has authority to close areas to protect, if they determine it's necessary to protect public safety or to protect a unique plant or animal community. Those are the two things the board can do. The department has some authority to close by designated use areas, within 100 yards of a designated use area. And the implementation plan, the department has included closure within 100 yards of designated use areas, what those designated use areas are, and closures necessary to protect public safety that they're asking the board to approve. If the board doesn't approve those, then it's wide open.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what our responsibilities and alternatives are. So, you just explained to us that if we do nothing, then 168 is impacted throughout the state, throughout all the parks, period. If we do what staff is presenting to us, recommending, we would be adopting the maps, the closure of certain areas, the designation of certain parks where archery only, etc. What are our other options? What are all our options that the board can do right now?
To follow up on that, as long as we're looking at this, if we adopt the department's recommendation, let's say the season is going to run from November 15th to December 15th in the month of April. Does that meet the requirements of the law?
If you feel it's necessary to protect public safety, it would. If you make that finding, if the board makes that finding by
Can we
majority
make
of
the
vote.
finding on Bill's recommendation that we're doing it to protect public safety? That we have already looked at all these parks through the years and decided what is and isn't safe, and that we like what we've done in the past?
I agree with Christine, and it's not a safety issue. I'm convinced that hunters and trappers in the midst of the quiet sports is way safer than walking the streets of most of our major cities. But it's the perception of safety that we have to embrace. And I really feel that the people have spoken. And so, the legislature has given us a task to do. And I think we have to do it.
Bill,
I'm still waiting for Tim.
Okay, the options for the board.
according to Tim.
Well, yeah, according to
For legal advice.
yes. You have in the agenda this implementation notice. That's what was posted for you to act on. So you cannot approve it. You can approve it as is. You can approve it with changes. And my recommendation is the changes have to be within the scope of what was noticed on the agenda. And when you approve it with changes, if you're going to add restrictions, again, you have to do that on the basis that it's necessary to protect public safety. And in terms of what the department brought before you, that's what the department staff felt is necessary to protect public safety. To go beyond that, there's got to be something that you can use, some other information. And I don't know what that is.
So, do you have a definition of public safety?
It's to protect the safety of the members of the public.
Question.
Does the law do what the representative spoke to at the outset? That the way things are now is from a premise that all state parks are closed unless we open them up. Does the law, the way it's written is 168, spin that around and say, you know what? Everything is open unless we make
Unless
close.
we change that.
Unless we change.
That is correct.
Okay.
But the premise, again, is the reason we would change is for
Public
public
safety.
safety.
Yeah.
So if the law spins it around, then we could adopt Bill's motion, which is, I keep it
That's
the
the way I
same.
see it.
We don't have to adopt the plan that you put forward. We could adopt something that already exists as an alternative.
So what Bill's motion is talking about is, we want parks the way they are in 212 with managed hunts that are currently going on. We think that protects public safety. We don't want to take the leap over to 168 and open it up.
So Bill's motion then is to add to that, to change the implementation plan so that the restrictions are what the 2012 restrictions are, as necessary to protect public safety.
And another way to say that, and to deal with that is, if park staff puts together management plan 2, which is by park location, the current rules and regulations that are currently in place, we could adopt that rule.
And if the legislative committees don't like that plan, they'll send it back to us for specified or unspecified reasons.
And I would add, it seems to me that the legislation says that public safety is whatever 4 members of the Natural Resources Board determine it is.
That is correct. In terms of legislative review, in Act 168, the legislature delegated that authority to the board, and there is no formal required review of this decision. It's not a rule. You're not acting on a rule that has to be approved by both houses of the legislature before it goes into effect. Now, the legislature can interject themselves in any part of the process that they wish. But right now, there is no formal review of this decision. They've delegated it to you to make in Act 168.
Okay, I like Bill's motion.
Let's call the question.
Well, does he have a second, or did you withdraw your
I'm going to
second?
withdraw my second on that one.
Okay.
Because the whole spirit of the law was to add more opportunity to our state parks. And we're not adding any opportunity by doing it.
Yeah, I think
Well,
You are technically correct, but the spirit of the law is to expand hunting and trapping opportunities.
And we're not doing it if we go back to what we
And-
had.
haven't done it yet.
And I'm saying that to narrowly focus on just the state parkland is really not, it is not in the spirit of Act 168. We need to expand.
But the law is 168 state land.
Yeah.
State park.
68. And I think we have a hard time making a case that even just expanding bow hunting goes against the public safety. That's a pretty hard case to make.
In a short period of time, can staff tell us what parks currently are open for any hunting and trapping?
We can't do that in an appropriate time. We're going to
Or
have.
what percentage of our parks?
Well, Danny's should do that.
We need a second.
I would go with second.
Continue the discussion.
Second. You need a second.
You second?
Yes.
Carried.
Here's what my question is, which, sort of statement would be, is, which I think addresses some of Kaz's concerns and maybe calms down the people in the legislature that were the fire bearers of this. And that is, if we would move forward on this with a friendly amendment, if there was ever a motion, that would instruct staff to look at all the parks and make a recommendation to us of, for example, the 9-day gun season as being appropriate in other parks that currently aren't. So to look at these things that would expand those opportunities, yet address all the concerns that have been expressed here, some of which unfortunately were directed at staff and at the board that we had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And that suggested that some of the people are suggesting that we've expanded the hunting seasons to 7 months, which, none of that is accurate. And so I think we got a big job to.
Restate that amendment, because I think that's legitimate.
We don't have a motion, so you can't have an
Yeah,
amendment.
Bill's motion is on the page.
To your
James seconded.
okay.
suggestion, I would say that we have already, as a board, we have already looked and
Right.
expanded hunting at every opportunity where it was appropriate. We've made those decisions already.
Except if can I respond, please? The response, Dave, is that obviously the legislature doesn't think so. So, we got a couple different publics that we deal with here. And I think it would be very appropriate to have staff look at that and make recommendations. They may come back with the recommendation is none. That may be their recommendation.
if the legislature thinks what we've done is inappropriate, they get to do what they get to do. It's a democracy. And they can take it.
Yeah.
Except we're charged with the responsibility of oversight of the natural resources. And I think that would be appropriate. I'll make a motion to amend Bill's motion that we request staff at our next meeting, unless Dan doesn't think our next meeting is giving them enough time, to look at the parks that we currently have, hunting and trapping allowed, and to see if there's more opportunities for us to present that on a limited basis as it relates to season, deer hunting season, those kinds of things.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So are you saying that wherever we have a 2012 season, you want us to consider additional opportunity at that park specifically and no other? Or are you asking us
Any
to?
parks.
At any parks for those types of seasons, which is basically,
I think they just did that.
Yeah. It could very well look like the same document.
Yeah.
It could, but.
But it might be only the 9 days
But
of
it,
season.
right, it could very well be. That's-
The secretary would like to make a comment. Please, I can see perspiration coming here.
Not at all, Mr. Chairman. First of all, again, I want to thank you all for the spirited debate because that's what you're here to do. And as a former board member, I can sympathize with some of the stresses that you're going through right now and how to answer all the different things that we've heard in here today. I will tell you, I'm really concerned about a couple of things because being a former board member and being a former legislator, I think I can speak with some good experience here on how this will appear. I'm concerned about what I think could appear to be flying in the face of what the legislature intended with Act 168. They have given us a very clear direction, as Preston said, to give a turnabout in the perspective on how it is that we look at hunting on our parklands. And what the department has done in response to that is what the department's responsibility is to do, which is to go out to the public and in this particular measure went out to the public in an extraordinary way through the help of all of you and your facilitation of those, Jane. I'm very thankful to that. To me, we've already gone through all of these parks already, so when you say have the department go back and look at all these individual parks, that's what we've done with the input of men and women across the state to give us their direct input on particular properties, which is an extraordinarily thorough review, and to look at it through the lens that the legislature has directed us to look through this time, which is how to expand possibilities on state parklands, not how to circumvent what the will was through Act 168. And I'm concerned as the secretary of the department, when we're charged to carry out what the will is of the legislature and the governor and the people of the state, that going, kind of doing a turnabout and looking at it through the old lens will not bode well for us at the department. And I'm just laying that out there. Ultimately, you are the decision makers, and I put that back in your hands, but I'll tell you, you couldn't have had a more thorough review on each individual park than what our folks did and what the people out here have contributed to in that process, and the hundreds of people across the state who also did too. So I'm hopeful that you will put your trust back in our parks folks and all the reviews and the hundreds of hours that they spent to review those property by property by property to carry out the will of the elected officials of the state of Wisconsin.
the premise in which we, as recreation managers, developed our recommendation. We did not close every designated use area, and we tried to find that area of the park that's lesser used that would provide some, ample opportunity. And the example at Governor Nelson is if we'd have provided a closure into that very north trail system, yes, it squeezes down the amount of available hunting quite a bit. Probably the hunting that's going to go on there would be waterfowl hunting along the shoreline of the creek. That's probably one of the few opportunities that exist there. Certainly within the purview of the board to because that trail is open in our recommendation, is to pursue closure in that area. But that was our premise.
Well, it could be lost for this meeting. At a future meeting, it could be utilized.
I I heard one particular issue about Roche Crusade Park, and I just kind of looked at the map again about a strip of land on the east side of Highway 13. That might be one where, you know, we just simply sort of missed it on the map. A natural area that was talked about related to public hunting that's available immediately adjacent to that state park is actually to the north of that strip of land. All the other issues that I thought I heard here today related to sort of the amount of the designated use area closures and to expand that for some trail systems where we did not do that. And this really is the balance issue that the department has had to weigh, which is, and I think we mentioned that in all the listening sessions, if we used our department closure authority on literally every designated use trail and every designated use area, you would create a real patchwork of open and closed if the board didn't do anything more than that. And what we tried to do is, again, look at those most heavily used sites in a park and close that, and then recommend closure beyond that for the board to consider. It certainly is debatable and within your purview to go beyond what we have recommended related to additional closure as to what you've heard today. But that was the sort of the
I have a question for staff. I have a question for staff. Go ahead. Tim Andrew.
Tim Andrew, Chief Legal Counsel at the department. The legislation that goes into effect after the first of the year and opens up parks to hunting across the board. So if the board fails to take any action at all on this implementation plan, then everything is open. There's no closed areas. There's none of the proposed closed areas or time restrictions that are in the implementation plan.
In all the work that the staff would have done, plus the changes that have been made relative to opening and closures at individual parks would have been lost.
was to create some ample opportunity while providing for sort of the more heavily used parts of the park to be closed, either in a recommendation for your consideration or using our department authority for closure.
No more questions for now. What's your signage plan?
Well, we will sign in a variety of ways. We're going to sign the trails. We're going to sign, this information will be available at our offices. We'll put it on our webpage. We will create basically maps after your decisions that we will put at trailheads and at our park offices related to those hunting seasons and those areas of the park that would be open. So we have to do a fairly extensive signage program on the property and a fairly extensive